October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but that does not mean that it only occurs then. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence report that nearly 20 people experience physical violence by their partner or loved one every minute. Rosanna Sin has the story.
Fear and defeat are three words associated with a complex problem of domestic violence. It is an alarming and sensitive topic both globally and within our community. Domestic violence continues to play a role within the lives of many men and women. Panelists from the Domestic Violence Panel discussion at Jour College reported that domestic violence occurs not only in the form of physical abuse, but mental, emotional, and verbal as well. Pamela Davis from the Queen's Perinatal Comprehensive Counsel Center speaks more on the issue.
Remember, when we talk about domestic violence, and that's when you have two people who are in an intimate relationship, and one of those partners does things and says things and exhibits certain behaviors, like we just saw in the skits from Project Change, but they do that in order to have power and control over that other partner who's in the relationship. So regardless of what type of abuse it is, whether it be physical, mental, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, and the most recent form that we're starting to see written about in the literature is spiritual abuse, right? So those are the 5 classified categories of domestic violence. But it all comes down to one of those partners trying to have power and control over the other partner. I'll turn, my colleagues wants to add to that.
The latest footage of NFL player Ray Rice knocking out his fiancée in an Atlantic City elevator is helping change the way Americans view domestic violence. We now see that it can happen to anyone and anywhere, and many survivors are now speaking out on the issue, including people on college
campus. A lot of
campus.
times, people have grown up in households that are demonstrating and displaying domestic violence. And I think a lot of times people don't understand the impact that these things have on children, whether they be the recipients or the one that is actually handing out the abusive measure, whether it be emotional, physical. And it has an impact. Usually you can trace somewhere in their history that they've been exposed to such behavior, and not understanding that it's unacceptable and is incorrect and should not be happening.
BBC reports that 1 in 4 women will be abused or will experience domestic violence within their lifetime. Over 6 million people are victims of domestic violence each year. It can occur in any shape or form, including physical, mental, or verbal. Men are not the only ones that domestic violence can happen to, as men face domestic abuse by their partners as well. The DoSomething.org website stated that many cases are unreported, and only 25% of domestic violence cases are reported to police. Domestic violence is now receiving more attention because Americans are seeing that it can happen to anyone. Many people tend to stay in relationships where domestic violence is present, so they can keep their families together, or in some cases, because of financial situations.
If it was a case of domestic violence, couples would just throw it under the rug. Like in the past, they wouldn't go into it, and they would just continue with their daily lives and not let it know to anyone. You would not want everyone to know your own personal business and what's going on behind closed doors, especially if you're married or if your spouse. Even if you're not married, you still don't want anybody to know. But nowadays, I don't think anybody takes that any longer, especially women, when it comes to that. If you have a problem, talk it out. Do not go to violence or touching as your first resort. The last thing you want to do is something you're going to regret.
There are other celebrities that have made recent headlines besides NFL player Ray Rice. MMA fighter War Machine was on the run from police for nearly killing his girlfriend, porn star Christy Mack, in a brutal attack in her home. These are very public cases of domestic violence, but have helped lead to an increased awareness, especially through social media. Audrey Beverly Gooden created a hashtag, #WhyIStayed, which is a platform for victims to share their stories with the hopes of empowering other women. I'm Rosanna Singh reporting for YCTV.